So you have chaos in the beginning, and God coming to the chaos and bringing order, bringing cosmos. Cosmos is order to the chaos. And what God does is he creates Adam and Eve. And notice that you have the structure of creation, fall, redemption from the very beginning. Creation, and I'm also going to use the word election. And by the word election, I don't mean what probably a lot of us think of when we hear the word election. I don't mean predestination necessarily. It's mean God's choice of a person in history. All right, so here I mean that God chooses humanity of all of his creation and creates them in his image and gives them a particular task, a particular goal. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And they are going to be his. They're going to belong to him in a particular way, have a particular relationship with him, but not just for their own blessing, not just for their own benefit, but so that everything else will be blessed. This is always God's purpose. Election is always connected to vocation. You are blessed to be a blessing. You're not just blessed so you can be blessed. Hashtag blessed. You're blessed to be a blessing to other people. That's from the very beginning what happens with Adam and Eve. But as we know, there is a fall. There is sin and there is exile. So Adam and Eve are then kicked out of the garden. Right. Now, God still remains involved, though, with his people. And though there is all of this chaos that comes after the exile from Eden, God brings redemption through coming to Noah. And it says of Noah that when his father gives birth to him, he names him Nuach, rest, right? That's the name, what Noah means. And he says, maybe this one will be the one who gives us rest. This one. And that connects to the zerah, that there is a promise of a zerah. That's the Hebrew word for seed, or descendant, or offspring. And maybe Noah is the offspring. He is the chosen one. Maybe he is the descendant, the one who will give us rest. And so, Genesis 6:8, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. God takes Noah's family and with them starts over, as it were. Gives us this new start. And this is what we read about in Genesis 6 through 11. But as you know, this doesn't work out very well. Noah sins almost immediately after being rescued from the flood. And then his descendants build the Tower of Babel. They build Babylon. So once again, we have an exile. We have a scattering of humanity away from the place where they are. And yet God remains connected to humanity and now has redemption that will come in Abraham, who we're going to study in the second half of our time together. So with Abraham, you have God coming to one of these scattered people and choosing Abraham and his family and his descendants. Abraham is an idolater. He's an idol worshiper, like everybody else. But Yahweh comes to him and says, I will be your God. I will choose you to belong to me, and you will be blessed. And here's why. Just like from the very beginning, you will be blessed not just for your own blessing, but you will be blessed to be a blessing to everyone. You'll be a blessing to the rest of the earth. And what you see is that God is still trying to bring restoration, to restore humanity to their original vocation, to be a blessing to the rest of the created order. So he brings redemption through choosing a person in his family, entering into a partnership with them that would end up being a blessing to the rest of creation. So notice the structure here. In the beginning, we have chaos. God brings forth cosmos, ordered flourishing. Humanity brings back chaos, or concentrated chaos in Babylon, or we could say confusion in Babylon. And God works to bring back cosmos. So there is this constant war in the Bible between chaos from the very beginning and cosmos. God trying to bring order out of the disorder through grace, and humanity constantly bringing, through their sinfulness, through their evil, through their rebellion, chaos again and again and again. Now, as you know, if you know the story of the Old Testament, Abraham's family also leaves the promised land and goes to Egypt because of a famine. So that Genesis ends with Abraham's descendants in Egypt. And in Egypt, it starts out okay, but they will be enslaved. Egypt is the new Babylon, the most powerful nation on earth, the global superpower that takes these chosen people, the Israelites, or Abraham's family at this point, and makes them their slave labor force to build their pyramids and to build their cities, to build their towers. So now again, we have the need for redemption. We have the need for deliverance. This family through whom God is planning to bless all the other families is now slaves, a nation of slaves. How can you bless people when you are enslaved yourself? So God has to bring redemption, and the way that God brings redemption is through the Exodus. Book of Exodus, which we'll talk about on Thursday. God leads Israel out of Egypt through the Red Sea and to Mount Sinai, where he reconstitutes to himself a people. He says, of all the nations of the earth, you will be mine. You will belong to me. And guess why? So that everybody else can be blessed through you. You will be a kingdom of priests through whom all of the other nations will be blessed. So once again, you have now God coming and choosing, and every time it's a little bit more specific, right? So now this nation, not because you are greater than any other nation, in fact, you're the weakest nation, but because I love you, I've chosen you, I've elected you for a vocation so that you can be a blessing to everybody else. Well, if you've read the story, and we will keep going through the story, you see that Israel also fails as God's people. In fact, as you get to the book of Judges, we end up with them in the promised land, but everyone does whatever they want to do. Everybody does what's right in their own eyes, and we have, once again, a state of chaos, just like in the beginning. Chaos where everybody's just doing what they want to do, and horrible things are happening. There's violence against women. There's violence within Israel, civil war between God's people. There's idolatry. There's injustice in the promised land. And so this creates the need for a king who can lead the people in righteousness. So redemption will come then in the election of a particular line who can establish a kingdom of justice, a kingdom of righteousness, where the people will submit to the Lord and walk in his ways so that they can get back to their original vocation of being a blessing to the rest of the world. This is the covenant with David. So you see that God enters in at each stage, in the midst of human sin, in the midst of human evil, and keeps making promises, keeps binding himself to sinful people for the sake of blessing all of creation. And that's the story of Samuel through Malachi. Well, a spoiler alert is that with David and his sons, it doesn't work out. David is a good king. Solomon is a good king for a little while. But eventually the line is broken. And what happens is that at the end of the Old Testament, the people end up again, as in the beginning, in Babylon. So you see the parallels here as you read the Bible, how it all fits together. There's this wonderful narrative unity, this literary unity to the story. It is like there's these cycles that it goes through. And at every stage there is a creation or an election, and then there is a fall or sin or exile or driving out, and then God coming to bring redemption. And so maybe the best way that I could explain it to you is this way. This is Scottie Pippen. You guys know who Scottie Pippen is? He's a basketball player from the 90s for the Chicago Bulls. And it looks weird because this is actually from a Russian Matryoshka set. The Matryoshka is a nesting doll. So let's say this is Adam, right? This is the partnership that God made with Adam. And when that partnership was broken and God started over, then Noah stands in for Adam. Right, so this is Noah. And in Noah, imagine there was another guy inside this. You have Adam and the story of Adam, right? Now, when you have Noah and Noah's line builds Babel, now we need another story. So we're going to put Scottie Pippen inside Charles Barkley. I think Charles Barkley is. So this is representative of Abraham, the call of Abraham. But remember that inside Abraham's story is this earlier story, the story of Noah and the story of Adam. And then when Abraham, his descendants end up in Egypt, in slavery, there's a need for another covenant where God now comes to his people. This is Magic Johnson. Does anyone know who Magic Johnson is? Some of you do. Sadly, you don't. Magic Johnson. So this is now the story of Israel. But remember that inside the story of Israel, and the covenant with Israel, is the covenant with Abraham and the covenant with Noah. You see where we're going with this. So now Israel also goes into chaos. And so there's a need for a kingly line, and I'm not sure why they chose Larry Bird over Magic Johnson to be the next bigger one. This is Larry Bird. You know who Larry Bird is? Greatest white basketball player ever to play. So this is David, though, right? So God comes and makes a covenant promise with David. And remember that inside this covenant with David, inside the hope, the partnership that God has established with David is the story of Abraham and the story of Noah, the story of Adam. But as you know, the story of David and his sons also ends in exile in Babylon. And so there is a need as we come to the end of the Old Testament for someone to come up and encapsulate all of these stories, fulfill all of these stories. And this is the reason why the Old Testament matters for your faith. Because if you guys are into Jesus, if you say, I don't know about all this Old Testament stuff, but I like Jesus, at least, all of these stories help us understand why Jesus is so important, why Jesus matters, because what Jesus is doing is fulfilling all of the stories of the Old Testament. You know who the last one is going to be? You want to guess? Michael Jordan, yeah. Who actually went by the nickname Black Jesus when he played. So, when we come to Jesus, what we have is not just this sort of person who appeared out of nowhere, but this person who appeared that is fulfilling not just our story as people who need to be redeemed, but it's fulfilling this story, and this story, and this story, all the way down back to Scottie Pippen and Adam. These are called nesting dolls. So I got this when I was in Russia about 20 years ago. This is the Dream Team nesting doll set. And this is the first time I've actually used this to teach this idea, but I hope that it sort of sticks in your mind when you think about the way the Old Testament fits together, is what you have is really a nesting of story, inside story, inside story, inside story, so that when Jesus arrives on the scene, and why there is such this great sense of anticipation, and why the gospel turns Israel upside down and then the world upside down, is because you start to read things like this when you get to the Gospels. Jesus Christ, the Son of Adam, the Son of God, because he's fulfilling that story. You have Jesus coming on the scene and saying, I will give you rest, fulfilling the story of Noah. You have Jesus being introduced in the very first verse of the New Testament as the son of David and the son of Abraham. And you have Jesus being introduced as the new Israel. Because what Jesus is doing at every single point of the story is fulfilling all of the stories that have come before. Because where all of these other covenant partners fail in their partnership with God, Jesus will succeed. And he will be faithful to us as God, but he will also be faithful for us as a human. He will be the covenant partner that we were meant to be, who faithfully obeys and submits and takes the pain of covenant breaking upon himself and restores us so that we can have a meal with God. This is what the story of the Bible is about. It's a story of partnership. But don't miss it. All of this happens not just so that you can be saved and forgiven and redeemed and blessed, though all of that's good, but so that you can be restored to your original vocation to be a blessing to the world. From beginning to end, you are blessed and loved and chosen so that you can extend that blessing to the rest of creation. That's the story that Jesus comes to tell, to fulfill, and to invite you into. And that's why the Old Testament is important. Even though when we read it, we sometimes think, I don't understand where all this is going, I don't understand what all this means. This is what it means. It's telling one story. Story within story within story. And the literary brilliance of this is amazing to me.